I was exiting my apartment. I eventually saw as I see Jinho, with of course me being not that surprised that he was wearing armor once again. Though at least he wore a less amount of unlike the previous day. Of course, Jinho told me that he would take me with his taxi, with me explaining that he may be too much to spend that much money. Though he explained that it would be more than enough since he wants to drive me to the next race since he knows the exact location of them. Instead of me just driving and him just giving the coordinates to me. I decided to eventually agree with him. As we get on the car, I eventually told him that I needed to pick up someone on the way. Of course, Jim was confused on who I was gonna pick. With me eventually explaining that I'll pick up Song Yi. I mean, a young hunter that I actually went with in the Red Gate. Of course, he'll be surprised and eventually if she explains that she's the girl from the Red Gate, with me nodding in confirmation. Of course, the surprise is Junho, and eventually arrived. Song Yi eventually entered the car with Junho greeting her calmly. Eventually, as we went to the car, eventually Junho would have asked me a question how I knew her. Eventually, I would decide to tell him about the incident about the Red Gate and everything like that. With me also explaining that I don't have preferences about younger women. I prefer women that are around my age or above it. That's how I prefer them. Of course, June was actually surprised that I actually kind of like MILFs, as most people would say. With me just looking to the side and telling them to just continue driving, not asking me too many questions. And it's only just giggling at my reaction as he has never seen me this flustered before. With Juho deciding to remain quiet as he knows to not mess with me since I'm really strong. Eventually, after we drop off Songy, we eventually move on inside the raid. With, of course, my shadow soldiers easily dealing with the monsters, easily dispatching them and killing them with ease. I was able to revive a few of them, but I decided to just pick up the strongest of them all, who basically took the most time of being destroyed by my shadows, since most of them were easily dispatched by either Igris, Iron, or Baruka, who is the strongest currently. Of course, Igris was slightly behind him, but Baruka was still weaker in comparison to Serbi, who's an S rank type monster, so it was pretty obvious that it would rank way above him. Of course, I also glanced aside as I remembered that Jinwoo. This will be the first time that Jinwoo actually meet my shadows. With me explaining that I was able to acquire this new skill after a training that I kind of went through, to say the least. Basically, I decided to make it as big as possible for him to not suspect too much, since I didn't want to reveal the system to Jinwoo too early, since I want to get as strong as possible and to continue to increase my strength. I'll tell Junho about the system maybe later, but for now I can't, since I know that the architect will most likely make me do a penalty which will most likely cost me my life, since I know I'm very expendable in his eyes, since he can just find another person to basically manipulate to find another vessel for Ashbourne. So I knew to be cautious and not let too much secrets yet. First I need to feed him so I can clearly have control over the system, so I don't have to worry much about it in the future. Agojo is kind of bummed out since basically he cannot actually collect the essence stones, so that was mainly his job. With my shots was basically doing that. Of course, I told him that maybe he can do that if he wants. I just don't mind him assisting them. No, I told him that that is his choice. With, of course, Jiho thanking me. I went inside says that and think to myself that he is kind of weird, but that is a king that I'm getting used to. I see him as a younger brother myself, so it's very nice. He kind of reminds me of my younger brother in my previous life, though he's actually kind of more fearful of me, which I'll give him credit, I was pretty terrifying back in the incident with the Strike Squad, so I don't blame him for what happened. Of course, I also glanced to the side as you see him working with my shadows, with me of course glancing at Tank as he defeats other monsters. I of course survived some of the stone golems, most likely around 2 to 3, since most of them would have been too weak since they would easily have been killed by my shadow, so I just survived around the boss and maybe possibly 2 high ranking ones. They're not too high rank, since most of them were around the elite level or below, with of course only the boss being around higher than elite. Close to a knight rank but not quite there yet. But I was still pretty satisfied with the progress. But in the east coast of the USA, something would have happened. Instead of another dungeon, there'll be an A rank dungeon. With of course we hear a scream. With the scream being of an A rank hunter known as James. Of course he'll be fearful as he looks to to the thing in front of him, being a person with long hair and of course a beard, with incredible muscular physique and an aura of intensity, so much so that he was even surprised and pondered if that was a humanoid beast. As of course, this is something that rarely occurs, but it's possible for monsters to basically have a humanoid form. Of course, he was thinking of how is this possible for such a being to even exist in an A-rank dungeon, since he emits so much power that even the A-rank dungeon itself is slightly shaking. Of course, the figure looks to James, just calmly observing him, and eventually decides to greet him. Of course, James is easily frightened and eventually steps back and tells him to not get close to him. Of course, the figure just tells him to relax, saying that he's hurting his ears, and tells him to not worry about his friends, and as he told him that he's just knocked them out, so he doesn't have to bother with it much. He eventually also told him that he wants to go home and did that he's Korean, explaining that he's actually human. As his eyes glow inside yellow, he then points to his chest. But we then cut back to a restaurant where both me and Junho would have been having a conversation, with Junho eventually celebrating the 19th rate with me, with him explaining that he wants to achieve his dream of becoming a guild master, with me already knowing that. Of course, I decided to congratulate him, but I also told him that I'll maybe continue my business with him, since I see it as a very beneficial way. Of course, as we talked, I also noticed that I cannot even get drunk by any other alcohol, since mostly the system will be takes one of my blessings. I cannot get drunk, so I'll be easily able to listen would have detoxified the sustenance inside my body, even before it could reach my organs. What makes me that this is actually beneficial. If I'm not to even acquire the Black Heart or became the Monarch, I'm most likely able to live at least above 100 years with this. If I wanted to, that is a possibility. As I continued to listen to Jinho, William was still in calm thought, with him explaining that he would have to take the written exam for becoming a guild master to get his license, with me of course nodding as I listened to him. Of course, I also think to myself that Joe has been working really hard, and I can't say myself that I have been working hard myself, though I do wish that I would have helped Jinho much more, since I believe that he deserves better, since I know that his brother is kind of an arrogant piece of shit. Even though I didn't want to admit him in front of Jinho's face, I did really hate his brother, since I believe that Jinho deserves better. I know that his father does care about him, even though he doesn't show it. I just know that he deserves at least some type of care. I actually want him to actually date with my sister, since I believe that he's a very good match with her, since he does have kind of a good personality, which I kind of like about him. Though I know that Gina is still young, I believe in due time maybe she'll grow up, and maybe she can actually get with Jinho, since I believe that this would be very beneficial for both of them. Of course, I also glanced at my stats, with my level being 61. It's been a really long time since I've checked my level, but I also seen that I've gained an overwhelming amount of my stats, with me being very impressed at my growth and strength, with intelligence actually kind of being my lowest out of everything that I've actually spent my points in. Of course, I will mainly focus in the beginning of basically increasing my intelligence as high as possible, but for now I'm basically trying to increase every stats I can, with of course I'll just not upgrade sense, since it's already high enough as it is, so I don't need to upgrade it much. Since my senses have already been enhanced by a large amount, so I don't need to enhance it even more. I just need to spend more points to intelligence, as I know I'll need it in the future, especially if I need the Black Heart itself. I also wondered if I can actually buy new skills, maybe in the shop system, but for now I won't decide to not bother with it for currently, since I have a conversation with Jinho. Of course, I'll still think to myself that I still need to grow stronger, since the threats that I've faced, like Cerberus back when I was still really low level, have been really difficult for me. I know that for now, these threats will not be as much of a difficulty as it would be, but I still feel like I needed to go even stronger. Maybe if I'm able to clear the 75th floor of Demon's Castle, I'm most likely able to reach an S rank level. I believe so. Of course, Jiho also asked what are my future plans, with me of course just glancing at the key and for the castle's door key for Demon Castle. Of course, I know that when I get to the 75th floor, I'll grow immensely stronger. But I also know that I cannot basically revive any of the demons which I'll face inside a dungeon, since their mana is very corroded. So I basically will not be able to get any child soldiers. I will just level up and gain points. So this will be very big of a loss if I can have much more shadow soldiers. Since my intelligence have been increased, I can basically save up a lot more soldiers than previously. With the rank, with the amount of shadow soldiers that I can actually store reaching around 100 if not even more. With me being very glad that I've reached this level. But I also know that I still need to get even stronger. Of course, I still know that it might take some time, but it will be something difficult as I cannot explain it. But for now, you just have to believe me that I am indeed busy, and it'll be very hard to think that I'll need to achieve in the future. Of course, Joe eventually decides to have a conversation about his family with me already knowing what he's about to say. And I told him that, yes, I do see him as my younger brother, with Joe being extremely happy as he hears this. Of course, I told him that I already see him as a younger brother, and I do actually believe that maybe in the future he'll be able to date my sister, as long as she's open to the idea, of course. I do not mind it. Since I know that Jiho is a pretty good person, and even a kind-hearted one as well. And I trust him more than anything else. He's the person outside of my family that I trust the most. Of course, this makes Jinwoo really happy. With me explaining that I'll always see him as my younger brother. Of course, Jinwoo is really happy as he cries his eyes out due to being incredibly drunk, with me just telling him to calm down as he has drank too much alcohol. With me being very worried for him, since this is kind of the first time that I've seen him drunk this much. But I still can take care of him nonetheless. I also glance at the news as I see Mr. Bake as he talks to the news about the Red Gate incident. Of course, I know to myself that it's been very difficult for S rank hunters to deal with the media. I know that firsthand since I've seen it in my past life through the manhwa as I read it. So I know that he's having a really hard time. Though I wish that I could have made it less hard, I know that for now I can't do that. I still have not reached the level of an S rank myself. At least not yet. Of course, Mr. Big tries to explain that the association is handling everything, and he of course, is trying to not reveal too much information to the media, since he doesn't want the media to bother him too much. Eventually, I also feel like this one I should be talking about me, the media. We asking questions and even ask about the Red Gate and who actually cleared it. With me already knowing that they're basically talking about me, yes, of course, Big tries to fake any information since he doesn't want to reveal too much, since he believes that I want to keep my identity hidden at least for now. Of course, back in White Tiger Guild, Big would have, of course, sat on his seat and he sighed in relief, finally able to basically have a breather after dealing with the reporters, since the reporters are real big pain in the ass in comparison to anything else that he'll just deal with. Of course, he just relaxes, but also thinks about me and how my rapid growth have been going. With him, of course, knowing about me being an E rank, but also being able to basically help other ranks able to clear a red gate, which is around the B rank, and increases difficulty to all the way up to A rank, was pretty impressive. Of course, eventually he gets a call, and eventually he hears from one of his men that the association isn't actually thinking about giving another chance of doing the Jeju raid island. To Jeju island raid. Of course, Bake is actually surprised. He remembers the really dark memories about it. With him explaining that he can never forget about what happened. Explaining that it was a very brutal thing. And it was actually the first ever S-rank gate to appear in Korea. Considered one of the most powerful calamities which has happened on Earth. Of course, except for the greatest calamity which appeared from the first S-rank gate. But Jeju Island is actually became the closest thing to it. As due to the appearance of those mutated ants, those ants were immensely larger, some even reaching and even surpassing the height of a regular human, with most of them being almost comparably stronger than even around C to B rank hunters, with even E rank hunters actually starting to have difficulty dealing with some of them. Though most were around B rank, some of the ants were incredibly strong, and due to the ant queen basically reproducing so much so fast, the ants were able to basically conquer the entire island and in completely destroying the entire population. Only ants were able to survive, while most of the humans inside the island were either evacuated or have been killed a long time ago. Baker could not even remove this thing from his nightmares. Remembering it as placed from nightmares, as he could still fear, they didn't even hear the screams of the fallen hunters, which he actually have team with. With him still remembering how their flesh was torn by those ants. You still haunt him to this day, and knowing that the judge rate will still be concluded from Nakira Hunters Association, he's still fearful of this island itself, since he knows it's a very dangerous place. An asteroid gate after so long, yet it's still functioning. It's been gone for years, and it's not been closed. Bake is not sure if anyone but a national rank hunter can even close it. Even back then, national rank hunters were barely able to close the first ever calamity. Though they have been growing stronger ever since that day, he's not quite sure himself if even a normal asteroid can even do that. Of course, he also gets another information from one of his associates, with them explaining that dance are actually starting to mutate, with some of them even able to have the capability of flying, with of course Big being even more shocked, as some of them were actually able to be spotted by nearby shores of Japan, shocking Big even more about this information, realizing that the ants are actually getting even stronger after so long. While back in the apartment, I will tell Gina that I'll be gone for a week, as I think to myself that I need to clear Demon's Castle at least to the 75th floor, since I know it might take a really long time, but a week should be more than enough. Of course, Gina teases me in days that I'm going with my girlfriend, Juhi, but I told her that not in a moment, and I'm just going alone. I was thinking to myself that in my free time, I didn't indeed went to a date with Juhi, though it was basically for a couple of hours since I was kind of busy with leveling up, but I did contact her, even text her multiple times. As I enter inside the demon's castle, I'll also be surprised at how different it is, though it's still incredibly torturously hot inside of it. And as I just wipe a slight sweat from my head, but I know at least my resistance to this heat is at least bearable than most. Of course, we know that this is actually a field type dungeon. Basically, I can already tell that this dungeon is very close to an S rank 1, and I already know it's an S rank 1. So, yeah. I also will glance at the key, as I know that it will open the next doors to the next levels. And I know that I need to get an entry permit to get to the next floors, which I know are actually separate dimensions. Of course, I will then open the gate, and eventually I'll get a quest, with me basically need to collect the demon souls. Of course, I'll be pretty surprised, since actually this has been so long ever since I have actually gained a quest. Of course, I've been doing my daily quests multiple times, and I've gained tons and tons of stats. So it was not that difficult for me to assess that I would eventually get one after I enter the next level of the demon's castle. Of course, I'll just push from around the door as I then looked around, as I realized that it's actually, as I thought, it's indeed a field type dungeon. I already knew that, but I just wanted to confirm my suspicion. I also did actually realize that it was actually a lot bigger than I expected. I know it's an own separate dimension, but it's actually immensely huge. It's almost the size of an entire country, not even more, which impressed me even more. Of course, I also realized that it's actually almost a complete replica of Syria, the entire city that both me and Jika live in, with the entire country being in it. Of course, I'm surprised that it actually has an identical replica, though I know that this is basically a future which might occur, and it has actually happened in one of many times. Though I keep it to myself. Eventually, I'll spot demons, with most of them being either high or low rank. Of course, I'll just drop my back and instantly disappear, instantly rushing at them, and I think to myself that, well, I guess it's time for me to grind like nothing else. With me instantly rushing at the demons as I slice each one of them, killing them instantly, as I was able to easily defeat most of them. With me thinking to myself that it's getting pretty easy for now. It will be easy for now since I'm incredibly high level, but I know as I go on, the difficulty will eventually increase even more. But I know I also grew stronger because of it. Also, glance is I know in the Taste system. I can now know where I'm about to level up, with me saying that it's very convenient. As I smile as my eyes glow blue, with me thinking to myself that this will be very, very beneficial in the future, and it is now, of course, as well. While back in at the North Korean restaurant, we'll see as Jinho will be actually having a conversation with his father, trying to explain that he wants to basically take on the responsibility of taking care of the Eugene Guild, his father's guild that he built over the years. Of course, he tries to basically point out the multiple other benefactors that he can basically give his father, but his father already told him that it's enough. He explains to him that he will basically gain control over the Eugene Hill. Of course, June was actually surprised to hear that from his father. With, of course, his father telling him that he believes that his son has the right judgment, but also knows that he's also been benefactoring with me. Of course, June was actually surprised to actually hear this from his father. He knows this information. With, of course, June's father explained that he is very, very good person, and of course, he knows where his son is deceiving him or not, since he is really, really dedicated to his work. So he's not that easily fooled. But of course, he also tells Jun to recruit me if he wants to take part and even be the next guildmaster to the Eugene Guild. Of course, Jun then looks to his father and tells him that he will try his best. But of course, he knows that it might be hard for him to do this, since I mostly prefer to do every raid that I do solo, without anyone interfering in my work. So it might be difficult for me to even accept this. But Jun doesn't know that when both me and him create our own guild, it'll be more than enough for me. While back inside the demon's castle, I was easily able to basically defeat more and more of demons. With me saying that is having, I still have a long way to go, but I'm pretty glad about my progress. Of course, I also glance at how many demon souls I am able to collect, but I also would have glanced at some of the items I also collected. So I know that I still have a really, really long way to go with this quest. But it's not that bad, as I see it as a very beneficial factor for my growth. I also glance at the entry permit. Well, of course, I would smile to myself, saying that this will be very beneficial, since I know this will help me in a really, really much. And it's time for me to go to the second floor. With, of course, me just staring at the beacon of light as I realized that this is basically the entrance for it. Of course, I was summon Tank and eventually told him to take me there. As I hop on his back, Tank will easily rush in, as multiple other demons will try to stop us, but Tank will easily able to bear his claws into them and easily push through, with me just smiling as I join the ride. Santa Tank is really amazing. As I pat his back, with Tank just growling in happiness as he runs with me on his back. Of course, I'll tell him that he's doing a really good job and tell him to go into that definition of circle. Well, of course, Tank listens to my command. While back inside the investigation of the in the USA, the deputy director and some other hunters would have looked inside the cell where the mysterious person will be inside. With, of course, the director being informed that he was basically found in an E-rank gate, with even estimates of his mana actually saying to be surpassing the A-rank gate, saying that he's probably a humanoid mana beast, though they're not quite sure. Of course, the Guildmaster would eventually told him to bring Mr. Juan so he can basically interrogate him just in case, since they know that an extra encounter will be more than enough to handle a magic beast of that caliber, with everyone being curious if that will actually work. While back inside the Demon's Castle, I've been easily able to grind through multiple of the levels, with me getting more and more entry permanents, and also going to the floors with incredible speed. Of course, I already could tell that due to the Song's Tower has around 100 floors, this will basically mean that Demon's Castle basically has around 100 different worlds, with me already knowing this very well. But I want to basically refresh my memories as I continue on with it. With me knowing that the past would differ and some will actually be either easier or difficult. But I know that with my current progress, it's going smoothly. With me, of course, basically moving through the floors with immense speed. It's due to me and my shadow soldiers being able to clear most of the levels. With me, even being by myself, able to clear from the second all the way up to the 10th level by myself, with me needing a little bit of help from my shells. But I continue to grow stronger alongside my shells as well. With my shadow soldiers getting stronger and stronger with each floor, alongside myself as well. I eventually would have killed another one, while demons collect even more souls and of course getting much more experience. With me knowing that a higher rank demons will also grab me much more souls alongside much more experience as well. Of course, I also glance at my skills as I realize that due to my usage of the commander's touch, it has actually have been leveling up. With me smiling as I realize that sooner or later I'll be able to level it up to ruler's authority, as I know that it will be very beneficial. Of course, I can already tell that the Mirak demons are probably more or less around the C rank. And of course, I already know that high ranking demons are probably even stronger from around A to around S rank, since I know that they have gotten even stronger than before. So I'm more than prepared. And I know that sooner or later I'll be able to reach the S rank level. I'm really close to it. I also glanced at the numbers of demon souls that I've been collecting, with it reaching 2,116, with me being happy with the progress that I made, even though it's been just around 2 days. But I still continue on as I continue to push forward, as multiple days will pass, and eventually I was able to reach the 49th to all the way up to the 5th floor, with the ranking of the demon souls increasing with astonishing speed. As I continue to clear the floors with immense ease thanks to my shadow soldiers and my own strength. Eventually, I was able to reach the ruler of the lower floors, and being Vulcan. Of course, I know that he's a very powerful demon boss, so I know to handle him. I also glance at his army, as I can tell that they're high-ranking demons, so they'll most likely range from A to around S rank in level. I also know that their boss will most likely be a S rank himself, or not even higher. Of course, I would smile to myself and I think to myself that he's really fat even though he's a demon, but it'll be fun to face him. Eventually, I would eventually tell my shadow mages to fire at his demon soldiers, with my mages firing with them at speed as they're able to easily annihilate his army. Of course, I'll then tell both Iron, Igris, Baruka, and of course, my other shadow soldiers to basically handle the rest, while I deal with the leader. All of them nod and eventually listen to my command, instantly rushing in, as Blaze is able to easily cut through most of the demons with ease, showing no difficulty, as Iron blocks most of the attacks, and of course, Igres is easily able to cut through the demons, showing no difficulty as he fights against them, with Baruka also aiding the two of them, utilizing his camouflage skill to easily disarm and even cut through multiple other demons, easily dispatching them with ease. I also would have glanced as I seen as Vulcan would instantly rush at my shadow swords, trying to squish them, but before he can do anything, Cerberus would have launched at him as it bites his neck, easily pushing him back as Vulcan screams in slight pain, being injured by Serbian, but he's pushed back. Eventually, I will instantly appear in front of his face as I will charge up my rules authority alongside enhancing, utilizing my strength as I tell Vulcan to focus on me. And instantly, I'll push him square in the face, instantly making a gigantic hole in his cheek as I send him flying. I also glance at my stats as I realize that my strength has actually been going way up, alongside me spending some points to strength as I actually not even realize it. Vulcan, of course, would have sent through multiple buildings, instantly crashing into one. With me, of course, actually being surprised of how strong I have become. I realized that my strength is actually above that of jinwoo when he basically reached to a 5th floor. So I was incredibly surprised by my strength reaching this low, but I also know that this is not the end, as I'll see as Vulcan would activate his skill Rage, just like Cerberus had before I made him into my shadow. Eventually, Vulcan would explode with energy, as his stats would be increased. I also know that he's also grown even stronger and more faster, as he will instantly rush at me. But Cerberus was able to easily cross Vulcan, as Cerberus can also utilize the skill Rage, increasing his stats and increasing his speed as well. It is able to push back Vulcan and even distract him just enough for me. I eventually utilized my speed skill to instantly rush at Vulcan, Would may explain to fat demon that if he thinks that he can basically overwhelm me with his immense strength, he has chosen the wrong opponent. Since I'm not weak, nor my shadows are, so I tell him that he is basically choosing wrong to face me. He should have made me attack with his soldiers and maybe he could have had a slight advantage, but he was arrogant, and his arrogance will pay for his own demise. Of course, Vulcan is shocked as I will instantly rush at him, with of course light emanating from my eyes as I will summon Baruka's dagger into my arms. And instantly I'll appear behind Vulcan as he was screaming in pain as I would have cut through his neck, unleashing a large amount of blood as Vulcan was screaming in pain, though he was able to endure it thanks to his pain tolerance being increased thanks to his rage skill. But of course, I'll once again rush at him, saying to him that he's really underestimating me. And eventually, after a tough battle, I'm able to defeat Vulcan with him dying an incredibly painful death, almost like his soldiers also being brutally defeated by my own. I would eventually glance outside as I got pretty good items thanks to me defeating the boss. So I got a really good items in exchange. Being the Demon Monarch's earring, the Orb of Avarice, the Vulcan's horn, and of course, the fragment of the Tree of Life. One of the ingredients I'll need for the Water of Life. Of course, I already know that the fragment of the World Tree can also be utilized to basically craft a high quality magic tool, but for now I'll not need it since I basically require much more physical strength than anything else. And I already have enough skill, so I don't need a magical tool. This will be very useless to me. And I also know that I don't have a powerful mage. Mages currently, since I have not acquired Tusk just yet. But my mages are strong just as they are. Though I know that Tusk will be in his own league as I give him the Orb of Avarice. Though for now, I think that the Orb of Avarice will be much more beneficial if it stays with me. Of course, I would then decide to pick up the Demon Monarch's earring as I'll put it on, as I also glance at the set effects which can grant me if I'm able to collect the other pieces. With me also seen as it grants me plus 20 strength and plus 20 health, with me being really happy of how it's an S rank item, with me being very happy about it. I also glance at the Orb of Avarice, being an A rank item, but I already knew that if it was just an A rank item, I wondered if it wasn't actually an S rank item. I wondered if it would actually basically triple the amount of the magic power instead of just two-folded instead. But I already know that this type of item will most likely sell for around a couple billions, since most items in the world are basically grant only percentage amount, not just amplify the magic power by 2 times. Most only amplify by 75%, not a whole two times, which is very beneficial to have this orb. For now, only decided to basically keep it to myself, as I know that my mages will not need it. I'll need it for one of my future shadow soldiers that I'll have in the future. But for now, we return back to USA. With, of course, Juan basically talking with the mysterious man as they have a conversation calmly. Of course, Juan is basically trying to interrogate him, but the man just remains calm and eventually even decides to tell Juan about an upcoming threat, even more powerful threat than even the magic beasts and even the gates which will appear. A threat that will be an even larger scale than anything else that has happened on Earth. Of course, Juan is basically skeptical about this, but eventually, after he heard his name being Il Juan, Son Il Juan, my father, with of course him being having a malicious smile and thinking that he will be able to get his revenge not just by killing me, but through my father, as he thinks that he can easily kill him. And eventually, he will decide to lie to the deputy director, saying that the man is actually a magic beast. Of course, my father would have easily glared at Juan and tell him that he's very arrogant. Even though he doesn't know even his own strength. With my father listening outside the Geo aura, with him utilizing his ruler's power to actually match Juan's own. Back inside the demon's castle, I will be standing in front of a shrine as I'll calmly watch, as my shadow soldiers would have rushed into battle, with both Igris and Iron being in the front, with both, of course, Tank, Baruka, and of course Cerberus being on the back. Of course, the skeleton mage will be confused, and I didn't tell him what's wrong. If he is surprised by by how my shoulders were this strong. And I told him that he really didn't see this coming, did he? With me just remaining calm and, of course, glancing at him. And I also realized that he actually felt fear, but that doesn't matter anyway, since I don't care too much. As I've easily able to slice through his sort of boss, being Mattis, the necromancer of the Demon Floor's castle, as I was easily able to defeat him. With me basically acquiring the notification that I've defeated the Soul Sphere medals, with me just calmly observing it, as I'll of course glance at the new things that I've acquired thanks to him. And I also have leveled up 2 times. I eventually would decide to utilize one of my new acquired skills that I was able to acquire thanks to me buying one of the skills from the item shop that I was able to acquire. It was called Mana Devourer, which basically absorbs the mana of my defeated opponents or monsters which I have killed, and higher the ranking, how strong they are, the bigger the mana I'll gain in exchange. And eventually, after I devoured, I was able to gain an astounding plus 2,500 mana. And now I'm pretty surprised. This will basically be equivalent to almost multiple level ups. With me being surprised and also glancing at my hand, as I realized that with this amount of mana, I'll be able to acquire even more shadow swords in the future. You don't have to worry much more if they get destroyed either way. Still able to have more than enough acquired mana. I also glanced at a new set I would acquire, being the Demon Monarch's necklace, being an S rank item. And it will also have granted me plus 20 agility and plus 20 intellect, which I already need to increase my mana pool even further. As I will smile, saying that this is a very beneficial item for me to have, as I equip it on. I also glanced that I'll need just one more step to basically complete it, and I also have gained plus 5 on all of my stats. Granting him, as I think to myself, this is really like leveling up 5 times, even though I have not leveled up 5 times. So this was a very beneficial thing to drop from boss level beast. I also have glanced at how much souls I've collected. I was actually collected at least above one more. So I basically completed part 1 of my quest. Of course, I will then tell the system to show the rewards. And eventually, I decided to accept reward 1. And I decided to pick the cursed random box. And I'm able to acquire the nameless key. And of course, with its difficulty also being unknown. But I already know that is actually the key to the double dungeon. The same dungeon that I almost died. And of course, 2 people lost their lives inside. This is basically the dark part of my past. But I already knew that I'm not strong enough just yet. I need to at least get even more powerful. As I'm still not outrageous yet. I need to get even stronger. Of course, I was able to also accept Reward 2, basically receiving a bonus 20 points, with me explaining that I'll most likely spend a lot more of it into my intelligence, as I don't need a lot more. As I would have glanced at my stats, and of course, I would have done the daily quest for the entire week, and I have upgraded my stats a lot, with all of them reaching an overwhelming height. With my strength reaching 183, my agility 173, my senses being 141, my health being 142, and of course my intelligence being 161. With my intelligence actually being the third highest thing that I have of all of my stats, I've being happy of the progress that I made. I also decided to accept the next reward, being the third reward, as I was able to get the blueprint from the Holy Lord of Life, the way to craft it. As I was smiling to myself, say that this is fine when I truly need it. I wish we then skip back to the USA, as the entire building was set on fire. Of course, on the deputy director will be surprised as Ihuan was easily defeated by the mysterious man, being my father, was easily able to defeat Ihuan without even trying, as he has also escaped and Ihuan was clearly injured. As he has internal wounds as well. At the hospital, I went to visit my mother, and I think to myself that even though I've grown stronger, I'm still not strong enough yet to even face Baran, the demon monarch himself. I think to myself that as I'm most likely in S rank, without a doubt. So I know that at least I'll be able to have the ranking in my favor. Since I know when I became an S rank and I'm able to validate myself as an S rank, I have more than enough influence to at least be not bothered by most of the reporters or anything like that. Nor will anyone try to challenge me, except other S rank hunters or possibly a national rank hunter. But I already know that by the time the national rank hunter tries to challenge me, my strength would have surpassed it. So I already know that at least for now, everything is safe. At least for now. But I've also noticed that I've actually leveled up 16 times ever since I entered the Demon's Castle. So I already know that with my current strength, I'm more than enough powerful. But I need to grow stronger. Of course, I'll go to the Hunter Association to basically reevaluate myself since I want to see how everyone will react. Of course, it's not that big of a deal, but I want to get my hunter's license to be an S rank, and I won't have to be bothered when basically asking for permission for gates to enter a site. Since S rank hunters don't just ask for site permission and get it instantly, since they're S rank, and that's basically one of the highest rankings to have. Eventually, when I get my turn to basically evaluate my rank, the woman inside would eventually tell me to just put my hand in there. And of course, I'll nod calmly and eventually place my hand inside of it as my mind would have flowed within the ball. But instantly, the machine would have malfunctioned, saying error. Of course, the woman was confused on what was happening, as she eventually called one of my colleagues to basically look at it. Of course, the colleague was confused and thinking that maybe it's just broken, and thinks that the low-ranking hunter is basically trying to test his money once again. But of course, I see that he's completely in shock and lost for words. As he glances at me and eventually tells me that this is actually not an error, but my money is actually too much for the machine to calculate, meaning that I am the 10th S rank of Korea. With me just sighing slightly as now I'll get slight attention, but it doesn't matter to me that much. At least, I'm now valued as S rank, but I will have to wait for my license to come out, since I know it will take a really long time, but it's not that big of a deal for me. As I was starting to walk out, eventually the man beside me would have told me if he can evaluate, with of course the man eventually confirming as they go inside to evaluate him. I eventually glanced at the hunter which would have come in being our S rank, known as Chu Jong-in, the master of the Hunters Guild, being one of the most influential guilds inside of Korea. Of course, he was trying to introduce himself to me, but I'll just calmly tell him that I'm busy and I cannot talk with him currently. Of course, he'll be surprised by my cold reluctance to talk to him, but he'll be very impressed. Also, when I'm going back to the hospital to look after my mother, as I can already tell that even if her eyes are not opening, I can tell that she's watching over me and Jinha. I told her that when my time comes, I'll be strong enough to basically help her remove the internal slumber. I also know that my father will soon be coming to Korea, as I know that he's on his way. I really hope that I can see him, at least much more soon than I can expect. But for now, I'll just have to deal with this for now. But I really didn't care for her. Ever since I've been reborn, I already seen her as my mother. She already took care of me more than anything else. Even with my past life, I do see her as my mother and more than anything else. And I want to save her. Just like I want to protect my family, I'll save her and protect her with everything I have, just like my father. Since I know he'll do the same in my position as well. As I leave my room, I eventually glance and I see Jinchul waiting for me. Of course, I'll not be surprised that I'm already calm. I'm just that the chairman wants to talk with me, as I already know. But of course, me glancing at the chairman, with me I should be surprised, as I can tell that the man around him is indeed one of the rulers. This is so pure and powerful, and I was very impressed. I can already tell that he is very powerful, and indeed worthy of someone being close to a national rank hunter, if not even already being a national rank himself. With me, of course, greeting the chairman, Gu Gugun Hee, with him being one of the most powerful hunters in Korea. And of course, I was very impressed by him, since I've never seen the chairman in front of my own eyes. So I was very impressed by him. Eventually, he talks with me about my violation and everything as well. Of course, I will just remain calm as I listen to him, with him also explaining that he is very impressed by how strong I've become. And he thinks that I may be a false ranker, but I already know that this is not the case. This was indeed an E rank. At least until I got the system, I was able to grow stronger and surpass my limitations. Something that most hunters could not have not done. I said that if they reawakened themselves. Of course, I also think about his proposal of me joining his guild. basically Hunter Association. Of course, I'm kind of doubtful, as I don't believe that I'm truly worthy of joining a Hunter Association. Also, I won't basically want to create my own guild, which would basically be connected to a Hunter Association. So I don't think that it will be that much difficult. But for now, I don't think that's very good. At least for now. I eventually told the chairman that I'll think about his proposal about joining the Hunter Association. But I told him that I belong to the dungeons, and I told him that for now, I will think about his proposal, but though I will not reject it as of now. I'll just think about it. I'm not rejecting it nor accepting it just yet. I'll just need the time to think about it. Of course, the chairman agrees with my opinion. I told him that I'm kind of busy as my little sister is at home, so I need to go really soon. Of course, he thanks me for my time, and of course, I would have thanked him as well. While inside another hospital, we'll see as Juan was actually laying there, with broken arms and even a leg, with him suffering immense amounts of injuries, because of the fight with him and my father. Of course, he was surprised he was woken up. Eventually, the deputy director would eventually told Juan that he needs to talk with him with something. Eventually showing the video of my father saving some civilians after the battle with him and Juan. Of course, Deputy Director would ask Juan if he really still thinks that this man is actually a beast. With Juan just glaring at the director, saying that he is indeed a beast. But after Deputy Director leaves, he then remembers what my father told him, saying to stay away from Korea. And he's not just saying it for his son's sake, but for his, as he never able to rest in peace, even in death. Of course, Juan is of course irritated by his thought and knows that he'll make sure that after he gets recovered, he'll make sure to make Juan pay. But there's still that thought of doubt that if he can even defeat him, even if he were to recover fully. But this is the end for this part, guys. Hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Sayonara.